I never thought my family would ask me for something like this, especially not after everything I had already done for them. I thought I had done enough. But there I was, sitting at the kitchen table, my mother's eyes fixed on me, waiting for an answer to a question I never expected. You know, Ethan's been looking at that house, the one on Birchwood Lane, his dream home as he calls it. My mother said, her voice casual as if she were asking for the time, not my financial future. He's been struggling to secure the funds, and well, we were wondering if you could help him out. You're doing well, right? I blinked, trying to process the absurdity of it all. Help him out? I repeated, my voice rising with confusion. You want me to buy him the house? My father, sitting across from me with his hands folded neatly on the table, nodded as if this was the most natural thing in the world. You have the means, honey. You've always been good to us. Ethan has worked hard for this, and we want to help him settle down. It's just a little extra help. Nothing big. A little extra help? Right. I felt my chest tighten. My brother Ethan had always been the golden child in our family. Ever since he was young, he was the one everyone expected to succeed, the one they put all their faith in. And somehow that expectation had twisted itself into a demand that I now shoulder the weight of his dreams. No, I said, the words slipping out before I could even think. The shock on their faces was almost enough to make me second-guess myself. Almost. I'm sorry, but I can't do that. It's not my responsibility to buy him his dream house. My mother's expression faltered for a split second before her lips tightened into a thin line. But you're doing so well. Why can't you help him? She pressed, her tone shifting. It wasn't pleading, not yet, but there was an undertone of disbelief, as if she couldn't fathom why I wouldn't do this for my brother. Ethan's voice piped up from the other side of the room, where he had been leaning against the doorway, watching the conversation unfold. It's just a house, sis. You've got the money and you've helped out before. You're the one who has always bailed me out after all. It's no big deal. His words were like a slap, the weight of them sinking deep into my skin. You always know how to turn everything I've done for you into an obligation, don't you, Ethan? I said, more sharply than I intended. Ethan shrugged. I'm just asking. You've always had the power to fix things, haven't you? His smile was there, but it didn't reach his eyes. It was a calculated grin, one I'd seen too many times before. A smile that begged for something, not a gift, but a command. I stood up abruptly, pushing my chair back with a force that made it scrape against the floor. My heart was pounding, my thoughts scattered, but I knew this was it. This was the line. I can't keep doing this, I said, my voice steady now, though my insides were twisting with a mix of anger and disappointment. I've given up so much for this family already. You've always asked for more. Well, this is where I draw the line. I'm not buying him a house. I'm not buying you a house. I'm done. The room fell silent, but not in the way I had expected. My mother's face hardened, her lips pressed together so tightly I could almost hear her thoughts. My father, ever the peacemaker, said nothing but gave me a look I knew all too well, the kind that said, "You'll regret this," and then they turned on me. "We're disappointed in you," my mother said, her voice cold now, each word punctuated by a tightness I'd never heard before. "We thought you'd be the one who would always come through for the family. We were wrong." I could feel the weight of their disapproval like a physical presence in the room, heavy and suffocating. But I stood my ground, even as my heart thudded against my ribs. Ethan's words followed me like a shadow as I left the room. "You'll see," he muttered under his breath. "You'll regret this. You'll always regret not helping me." The door slammed behind me as I walked out, but even the noise of it couldn't drown out the sick feeling in my stomach. I hadn't just said no to buying Ethan his house, I had said no to their expectations of me. I had finally drawn a line in the sand, and it felt worse than I could have imagined. As I walked down the hallway of my parents' house, my mind was a mess. How had I let it come to this? Why hadn't I seen this coming? Had I been so blind, so complicit in their needs, that I couldn't see the manipulation staring me in the face? I didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't want to be here, not anymore. Not with their disappointment hanging over me like a storm cloud. I grabbed my purse from the entryway and walked out, the cool evening air hitting my face as I stepped onto the driveway. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a pale orange sky. My car was parked there, but the thought of going anywhere, of doing anything, felt hollow. I drove around aimlessly, my thoughts spinning as the houses I passed seemed to blur together. I couldn't go back. Not now. Not after everything they had just said to me. I could still hear my mother's voice in my head, the coldness of her words. "We were disappointed in you." I wasn't sure where I was going or what I was supposed to do next, but I knew one thing for certain. I was not going back to my parents' house, not anytime soon. And as I drove into the night, I tried to imagine a life without their constant expectations. But somehow, it seemed like I was always going to be the one left holding the weight. The days after the conversation with my parents felt like a blur of confusion, resentment, and guilt. The initial rush of standing up for myself, of finally refusing to be the family's financial crutch, had quickly faded into a gnawing emptiness. I tried to go about my life, but it was as if something fundamental had shifted, something I couldn't reverse. I didn't hear from my parents for 2 days, and when I finally did, it was in the form of a text from my mother. "We need to talk." I knew what that meant. The moment I read it, my stomach dropped. I had already braced myself for the inevitable. This was the price I was going to pay for saying no. The call came later that evening after dinner. My mother's voice was tight, controlled, and colder than I had ever heard it before. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I don't know why you think it's okay to just walk away from us like that," she began, her words slow and deliberate. "You've always been the one who understood, who helped, who made everything right. But now you've just abandoned us." The guilt hit me like a fist in the chest. My mother's words were carefully crafted to sting. She wasn't just disappointed in me. No, this was a punishment, a reminder of everything I'd ever done for them, everything I'd given up. "I didn't abandon you," I said, my voice cracking slightly. I hadn't realized how much I needed to defend myself until I heard her accusation. "I just can't keep doing it. I can't keep saving you, Mom. I'm not your ATM." The line was silent for a long moment, and when she spoke again, there was something in her tone that made me feel like I had failed her. "You're not just saying no to us, you know. You're saying no to your family, to your brother, to your future." Ethan. I had always known my parents were more invested in him than me. They had made that clear since we were kids, but now it felt like that investment was the crux of everything. They needed me to keep supporting Ethan, to keep him afloat. They wanted me to stay in the role they had carved out for me, someone who could be relied upon no matter the cost. "I've given everything I have for you both," I said, my voice growing stronger despite the ache in my chest. "I've always put everyone's needs before mine. I'm tired. I've lost so much for this family. You want me to keep losing for him too?" Her response was immediate, sharp, and pointed. "You think Ethan doesn't deserve that? You think he hasn't been working for it? He's been struggling, but instead of helping him, you've turned your back on him, on us, and you're supposed to be his sister." Her words burned in a way I couldn't describe. It wasn't just guilt she was trying to manipulate me with. It was the long-standing narrative they had built around me. The perfect daughter, the one who could never say no, the one who was always expected to be the problem solver. "I'm not perfect," I said, my voice quieter now, the weight of everything pressing down on me. "I'm not someone's charity, Mom. I'm just trying to live my life, too." There was silence on the other end for a long time, then the sound of her sighing heavily. "Maybe we've asked too much, but you'll come around. You always do." The call ended before I could respond, and I stood there staring at my phone, feeling the air leave my lungs. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of what I had just said. It was as if nothing had changed. I had said my piece, but my mother still saw me as the one who could be pushed. And maybe, for a moment, I wondered if she was right. Maybe I had said no, but would I regret it? Would I come crawling back like I always did? But the truth was that I couldn't go back. Not this time. Not after everything. The next day, I received a call from Ethan. His voice was pleasant enough at first, but I could hear the underlying tension in his words, the faint edge of frustration that he didn't even try to hide. I don't get it, he said, almost in a whisper. You've always had my back, and now you're telling me you can't even help me buy a house? I thought family meant something to you. I almost laughed. I had always had his back. I had always given, sacrificed, and bent over backwards for him, because I thought that's what family was supposed to do, but it was never enough, and this time, I wasn't going to let him guilt-trip me into sacrificing more for him. You don't get it, Ethan, I said, my voice firm now, no longer apologetic. It's not just about money, it's about boundaries. I can't keep doing this, I can't keep fixing things for you just because you expect me to. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Then finally he spoke. His words slower now, almost as if he were processing something. I guess I never really thought about it that way, he said quietly. But I still don't get why you wouldn't help. We've always helped each other. I shook my head even though he couldn't see me. No, Ethan, you've always expected me to help. You've never once thought about what I needed. Not really. There was a long pause before he spoke again, his voice strained now. I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of this. It's just a house, sis. We're family. We're family. The words echoed in my mind as the call ended. We're family, and yet somehow I had always been the one to give, always the one expected to do the heavy lifting. No one had ever really cared about what I needed. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my parents' disappointed faces, my mother's sharp words, Ethan's betrayal. It all felt like too much to bear. But somehow deep down, I knew I had made the right choice. I didn't owe them anything, not anymore. I was done. But the truth of it all wasn't as freeing as I had imagined. In fact, it left me feeling emptier than I'd ever felt before. I couldn't shake the feeling that despite everything, they were right about one thing. I had let them down. The question I couldn't stop asking myself was this the cost of standing up for myself? Was this what I had to lose to finally be free? I wasn't sure, but I was about to find out. The days following the phone calls were a strange mix of liberation and guilt. On one hand, I had finally set a boundary. A real one, after all the years of bending over backward to meet everyone's needs. But on the other, the silence that filled the space between me and my family was suffocating. The phone calls stopped and the texts became fewer. I had expected some fallout, but nothing had prepared me for the isolation that followed. I couldn't tell anyone how I felt, not really. I had no close friends in my life who knew the full extent of what I was going through. I had always been the dependable one, the one who showed up when needed. So when I didn't show up for my parents, when I didn't help my brother with his dream house, I felt like a failure. Even as I tried to convince myself that I had done the right thing, doubt crept in like a persistent shadow. One evening, about a week after the last confrontation, I decided to go through my old photos. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I thought it would help me see how far I had come, remind me of the moments when things had felt normal, when I hadn't felt like the outsider in my own family. As I scrolled through the albums, I saw pictures of family vacations, birthdays, all those occasions where I was the one who made everything run smoothly. There I was in every photo, organizing meals, making sure everyone had what they needed. And there they were, my parents, Ethan, smiling as if everything was perfect. But it wasn't perfect. Not then, and certainly not now. The realization hit me like a wave. I had always been the one holding it together, making sure everyone was happy, and no one had ever asked what I needed. The selfishness of it all was staggering. It was like I had spent my entire life playing a role, and the minute I didn't want to play it anymore, they turned their backs. The silence between me and my family was unbearable, yet I couldn't bring myself to break it. They had made it clear what their expectations were. To them, I was the provider, the one who would always pick up the pieces, and when I didn't, the silence was their punishment. But even as I sat in that silence, I knew that no amount of guilt could erase what I had done for them in the past. No amount of guilt could change the fact that I had given up so much of myself for the sake of others. My life had become an endless loop of providing, of being there for everyone except myself. I hadn't realized how much I had been holding on to until I stopped. Days passed, and the weight of my family's abandonment began to feel more like a suffocating cloud than a clear, defined choice. I started to wonder if I'd been too harsh, if I'd made the wrong decision by refusing to help Ethan buy his dream house. But even as I thought that, I could feel the fire in my chest, the anger that had been smoldering for years. This wasn't just about a house. It was about the fact that they had always treated me like a solution to their problems, never as an equal member of the family. It wasn't just the money or the favors I had done. It was the emotional labor, the constant bending to their will, the absence of any real gratitude. I had been so focused on surviving their expectations that I hadn't even realized how much of myself I had lost in the process. And now that I was starting to regain some of it, I couldn't turn back. I picked up my phone one evening, staring at it for a long time before I finally hit send. It was a text to my mother. "I know things are tense right now, but I want to talk, when you're ready." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the send button. It was a message that could either open a door or close it forever. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was no longer doing this for them. I was doing it for me. I took a deep breath and pressed send. The message sat there, unread for hours. I thought maybe she was waiting for me to break, to beg for forgiveness, but I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't the one who had wronged anyone. And this time, I wasn't going to fall into the trap of thinking that my family's love was something I had to earn. The silence continued. It was almost 2 weeks before I heard anything back. It was an email from my mother. "I think it's time we sit down and talk. Maybe you'll understand that we just want what's best for you. For all of us." I almost didn't reply. I was tired of playing the role of the dutiful daughter who always came back, no matter how much I was hurt. But there was a part of me that still yearned for resolution, a part of me that wondered if we could somehow repair the damage that had been done. I agreed to meet. The moment I hit send, I knew it was a mistake. I was walking into their trap again. But this time, something was different. This time, I was prepared to hold my ground. The meeting took place in a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. My parents arrived first, sitting at a corner table waiting for me. I could see the tension in their posture, the way they sat upright, hands folded in front of them. Ethan wasn't there, but I could almost feel his presence in the room, the way he had manipulated things in the past, the way he had made me feel like I was the problem. When I sat down, my mother didn't waste time. She launched into her usual speech about how they had always been there for me, how they had sacrificed for me, how they had expected me to be the one who would always be there when things went wrong. But there was something different in her voice now, something that didn't quite ring true. It wasn't just guilt, it was desperation. "We're a family, you know," she said, her voice softer now, almost pleading. "And families support each other. You've always been the one who kept things together. Why are you pushing us away now?" I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream, because I'm not your servant, because I'm not your personal bank account, because I'm not the one who can carry the weight of everyone else's dreams. But instead, I said, "I'm not pushing you away, Mom. I'm just trying to take care of myself for once." Her eyes filled with something like hurt, and I realized how deep this had gone. She had never once considered what I needed. It had always been about what they needed from me. And now, they were trying to make me feel like the bad guy for refusing to give up any more of myself. "We'll get through this," my mother said, her voice tight. "We always do." And I realized then that nothing would ever change. Not really. I had fought for my own voice, but this family would always expect more. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't going to be the one who always said yes. I took a deep breath and stood up. "I think I need to go," I said quietly. "I've said what I needed to say." I left the cafe with my heart racing. I had finally said no to them. For real this time. But the emptiness that followed felt worse than anything I had anticipated. They didn't get it. They never would. But that was their problem, not mine. I didn't expect to hear from them again so soon. Honestly, after the conversation in the cafe, I thought that would be the end of it. The weight of their disapproval had left a mark on me. But I was done trying to fix things that weren't mine to fix. I had made the decision to stand up for myself, to set boundaries, and yet I was still haunted by the thought of my family, my parents, my brother, thinking I had abandoned them. But life has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. It was a Wednesday afternoon when I received an unexpected call from my mother. The voice on the other end was hesitant, softer than I had ever heard it. "Audalyn," she started, her tone carefully measured. We we need your help." I froze, feeling the air thicken in the room. The words caught in my throat, and for a moment I almost didn't know what to say. My first instinct was to hang up. I had already drawn the line and I wasn't about to let them drag me back into their drama, but something in her voice stopped me. "I'm listening," I said, my voice tight but steady. "I know you're upset," she continued, her words slow, almost apologetic, "but things aren't going well for us. We made some poor decisions, and now we're in a situation we didn't see coming." I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. This wasn't the moment for weakness. This was the moment for strength. "What are you asking for, Mom?" I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I'm asking for a loan," she said, her words laced with hesitation. Ethan is in trouble. He needs money to help cover his house payments, and we're struggling to make ends meet after some bad investments. We've always relied on you, Audalyn. You've always been the one to help when things got hard." The words hung in the air like a punch to the gut. My mother was asking me, yet again, to bail them out. The same family who had cut me off, who had manipulated me for years, now needed my help. They had pushed me away, and now that they were in trouble, they wanted me to come rushing back. My mind flashed to the conversation we had months ago. Ethan's dream house, my refusal to buy it. And now here they were, practically begging me for help. It was as if everything had come full circle. They expected me to give, and when I stopped, the rug was pulled from under them. "Mom, I started, but the words got stuck. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to express the mix of anger, betrayal, and sadness that coursed through me. They had hurt me so deeply, and now they were asking me to step in again, as though nothing had changed. "I know this is a lot to ask," my mother said, her voice faltering, "but we've always counted on you, and now we have no one else." I wanted to scream, to lash out, to tell her exactly how I felt, but instead I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and let the words spill out quietly. "I'm not doing this anymore. I can't be the one who always fixes everything. You had your chance to understand where I was coming from, but you didn't listen. And now I have to live with the consequences of my choices. And so do you." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the sound of her breathing, shallow and quick, and I knew that she was struggling to understand my refusal. "I'm sorry," she whispered after a long moment, "but I don't know what else to do." "You should have thought about that before you cut me off," I said, the words coming out sharper than I intended. "Before you made me feel like I was just a tool to fix your problems. I've done enough for you, Mom. I can't keep giving." Her voice cracked, and I could feel the weight of her disappointment even through the phone. "You're just going to leave us like this?" she asked, the sadness in her voice thick and heavy. "I'm not leaving you, Mom," I said, my voice softer now. "I'm finally leaving the role you've forced me to play for all these years. I can't keep trying to be everything for everyone. I have to start living for myself. I have to start taking care of my own life, for once." And with that, I hung up. The weight of the conversation settled over me like a blanket of guilt, but this time, I refused to let it smother me. I had done the right thing. I had said no. I had finally given myself permission to stop being the person who always had to fix everyone else's problems. But that didn't stop the pain. The guilt didn't just vanish because I had made the right decision. It lingered, gnawing at the edges of my resolve, making me question myself. Was I being selfish? Was this the right way to handle things? The silence stretched on for days, leaving me to grapple with these questions in solitude. I didn't reach out to my parents. I didn't even check my phone to see if they had tried to contact me again. I couldn't afford to keep going back to that place where I was expected to give and give and give without ever receiving anything in return. But still, the emptiness remained. I thought about Ethan. I thought about the house. I thought about all the sacrifices I had made for my family, and I wondered if I would regret cutting them off completely. But no matter how much I wanted to call them, to reach out, I knew that if I did, I would be falling back into old habits. I would be giving them the power to pull me back into their world, a world where I was never really seen as a person in my own right, only as the one who could fix things. I was tired of fixing things. One evening, as I was sitting in my apartment trying to distract myself with a movie, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. The words were simple. "Please come over. We need to talk." I stared at the message for a long time, my finger hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to keep moving forward without looking back. But another part of me, perhaps the part that was still hoping for some sort of reconciliation, wanted to go. I set my phone down and closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. I had made it this far without giving in, without succumbing to the guilt. I wasn't going to let them pull me back in again. Not this time. The message stayed unread, and I didn't respond. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was starting to get it. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need to fix things. I just needed to keep moving forward, and I needed to do it on my own terms. And so I did. The days bled into weeks, and the weight of my decision settled deeper within me. It was an odd kind of peace, one that came with a strange mix of triumph and loneliness. I had chosen my own path, one where I wasn't shackled to the expectations of my family anymore. Yet that freedom wasn't as easy to embrace as I had imagined. The silence from my parents had become unbearable, like a constant echo of everything I'd ever done for them, followed by the absence of any gratitude or understanding. I filled my time with work, and when that felt too hollow, I began to throw myself into new hobbies. I started painting again, something I hadn't done in years, and filled my apartment with canvases, all of them blank and waiting for me to fill them with color. The brush felt like a quiet rebellion, an act of creation that was mine and mine alone. But even as I painted, I couldn't ignore the nagging ache that seemed to haunt me, the feeling that I had cut myself off from something, someone important. And then, one evening, while I was sitting on the couch, scrolling mindlessly through social media, I saw it, a post from Ethan. There he was, standing proudly in front of the dream house, the one I had refused to buy for him. The caption was simple: "Dreams do come true." So grateful for this new chapter in life, my heart tightened in my chest. I didn't know what hurt more, the fact that he had the audacity to post about it like nothing had ever happened, or the realization that my family had moved on without me. They didn't need me anymore. And in some twisted way, that truth stung more than I had expected. I stared at the photo for a while, my mind whirling with the resentment I had been trying to keep buried. I didn't even want to know how he had managed to get the house, whether it was through my parents or some other means. But there it was, a tangible representation of my decision to say no and the consequences of that choice. I had always known that cutting them off would create a rift, but seeing Ethan standing there with a smile on his face, as if nothing had ever happened between us, felt like a betrayal in itself. Was it all worth it? I asked myself, staring at the screen, the question hanging heavily in the air. For a brief moment, I considered reaching out. Maybe I could send a message, asking how he managed it, offering some kind of olive branch. But then I stopped myself. This wasn't about the house. It wasn't about the money. It was about respect. It was about finally standing up for myself after years of being taken for granted. The truth was, I had been afraid that if I didn't help them, if I didn't keep giving, I would be left behind. Afraid that I would lose my family. But now, I was starting to realize that they weren't the ones I had to keep fighting for. It was me. I closed the app, put my phone down, and stood up. I didn't need to know what my family was doing anymore. It was time for me to stop living for their approval and start living for myself. A few days later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was my mother. "Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long time, my heart hammering in my chest. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Part of me wanted to walk away completely and never look back. But there was another part of me, the part that was still unsure, still haunted by the years of giving and sacrificing, wondering if maybe, just maybe, they had realized what they had done. I had to make a choice. I had to decide what this was really about. Was it about forgiveness, about healing, or was it about something else, something more painful? Was I just holding on to the idea of family, the hope that somehow we could all go back to the way things were before the cracks began to show? I couldn't make that decision in a text message. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and headed out the door. When I arrived at their house, the door was ajar and I stepped inside without knocking. The smell of my mother's cooking filled the air just like it always had. There was something almost comforting about it, but it didn't mask the tension that hung in the air. My parents were sitting at the kitchen table, waiting for me. The same table where we had eaten family dinners for years. The same table where we had shared laughs, arguments, and everything in between. But now it felt cold and distant. I didn't sit. I couldn't. "I know you're angry with us," my mother said quietly, her voice trembling just slightly. "And we don't have the right to ask anything from you, but we need you to understand something." My father looked at me, his eyes tired. "We've made mistakes, Adeline. We don't expect you to forgive us overnight, but we're asking for a chance to make things right, for us to be a family again." For a brief moment, I was silent. I looked at them, really looked at them. I saw the lines on my mother's face, the weariness in her eyes. I saw the way my father had aged, how the years had taken their toll. And in that moment, something inside of me softened. "I don't know if I can just forget everything," I said, my voice steady but raw. "I don't know if I can go back to the way things were. I've given up so much for you both, and I can't keep sacrificing myself just to make you happy." My mother nodded, as if she understood, though the sadness in her eyes didn't fade. "We've been selfish, Adeline, and I'm sorry. I wish we had done better by you, but we need you to understand. We need you." I took a deep breath. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the house. It was about their realization that they had taken me for granted. It was about them finally seeing me as more than just a tool for their convenience. "I'm not sure what this means for us," I said, looking at both of them, my heart heavy with the weight of my words. "But I can't keep being the one who fixes everything. I need you to understand that." There was a long silence before my father spoke. "We do understand. We want to change. We don't want you to feel like you're the one who has to carry everything anymore." For the first time in a long time, I believed him. "I can't promise that things will go back to the way they were," I said, my voice firm but soft. "But maybe we can try. I'm willing to try, but only if you're both ready to put in the work." My mother's eyes softened, and for the first time in what felt like years, I saw a flicker of hope in her gaze. "We'll do whatever it takes." And as I stood there in that moment, I realized that this wasn't about forgiveness. It was about boundaries. It was about allowing myself to be a part of this family, but on my own terms. Maybe we could rebuild. Maybe we couldn't. But for the first time, I wasn't holding my breath for their approval. I was breathing for myself. In the weeks that followed, things weren't perfect. I didn't expect them to be. Rebuilding trust takes time, and we had a lot of ground to cover. My parents, for the first time in years, made an effort to understand me, not just as their daughter, but as a person with her own dreams, boundaries, and needs. They made mistakes, and I called them out. But something had shifted between us, something that made the old familiar patterns seem less inevitable. Ethan didn't reach out, and honestly, I was okay with that. He hadn't earned a place in my life yet, not without showing me that he understood where I was coming from. For once, I wasn't chasing after him, waiting for him to realize how much I had sacrificed. I spent more time focusing on my own life, my painting, my work, and the quiet peace that had started to fill my apartment. I stopped looking over my shoulder, stopped waiting for the phone call, the message, the demand. For the first time in years, I was living without the constant pressure of being someone else's solution. One evening, as I sat on my couch, sipping a cup of tea, I got a message from my mother. "I'm proud of you, Adeline. You've taught us all a valuable lesson." I stared at the screen for a moment, the weight of her words settling over me. It wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement. And for now, that was enough. In that moment, I realized that I wasn't just reclaiming my life. I was finally learning how to live it on my own terms, free from the obligations that had once defined me. I had done the hard work. I had set the boundaries. And now, I could finally breathe. The past wasn't something I could change, but the future? That was mine to create. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. For the first time, I was enough just as I was.